Hey guys, Brian here from Better Chess Training. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you an endgame I played from a recent tournament. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button down below. Okay, check it out. Okay, this is from the third round of the Marchand Open, big tournament I played in a few weeks ago. And this is the end game that was reached, and it is a fairly complex one. And I wanted to show it to you because there are a lot of tactics and a lot to, at least it was very instructional for me. Let's just take a look and break down the position really quickly here. We can see here that White has two versus one pawn here. He has a pawn majority on the queen side, while Black has a pawn majority here on the king side. And right now, he's also has the two bishops, which is pretty good here, although this knight stands very well. And when I made a trade earlier in the game, I kind of had this in mind. Rook, of course, is active, attacking this pawn, but my rook is also on this nice half-open file. So um, the big difference here in the position, besides the two bishops, is my king is in a little bit of a better position. And because his knight's in the middle, there's a lot of potential here. Take a look here at f4, a lot of forking ideas. So what I wanted to do was undermine these pawns here. So I played h5. Okay? And my opponent found a really good move here, c4, of course, attacking this knight. And at first I thought this is probably good for me. I took that pawn en passant here, and when he took back, he now has this lone pawn here, which I guess you could say it's a pass pawn, but is also can be weak. So it has its pluses and minuses. However, as I started to look at the position, I saw that it was a little more complex. And if you could see here, this knight is blocking this rook, but this pawn is hanging here. And my intended move here was to play h4 to undermine, but then he has c4, which I don't think is horrible, but it dislodges this knight. So I had to make a big decision because I can. At first, I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to take this pawn, but then it's this pawn over here. So it actually took a little while on this move. Uh, both have decent time on our clocks. Actually, my opponent is getting into a little time trouble at this point in the game. Part of the message with this game is that when you analyze this with the chess engine, as I did after I analyzed it on my own, I saw that it was pretty even most of the way. But you could see because of the imbalances, there's still a lot of good moves that have to be played. So part of that, that's where the sporting aspect is, especially at this level. My opponent's rated about 1950 at this point, and so he's not a slouch. He's a very good player, and it was a fight. I decided that the best move here was to take here on c3, but the point was that after he takes here on g5, then I'm still going to go ahead and undermine him here. Okay, for example, if he advances the pawn, now I've got this big hole here. Okay, I could actually bring my knight back and potentially hit him with this check, or at some point lodge my bishop here to restrict this king. And we actually would have he'd have to be very careful about his king safety. But he did not advance his pawn. Instead, he took it. G takes h4, and that accomplishes the same thing. I sacrifice a pawn, I guess you could say temporarily, but now f4 is a big hole, and with these two doubled pawns, having an extra pawn isn't really that big a deal because you can only advance one at a time. Okay, so I brought my knight back, knight to d5, of course threatening to win this bishop with knight to f4 check. So he plays king f2. I play knight to f4 anyway, of course threatening this pawn and this bishop. The idea here is I wanted to take the initiative, or wanted to keep the initiative here. And again, at this point in the game, I think it's pretty even overall. I don't think anyone has an advantage, but and this is something I actually struggled with when I was rated, and still struggle with sometimes. Is that we do our tactics problems and we study master games, but usually when we study master games, we usually study wins, and most of the games are about how to take advantage and convert an advantage into a victory. And so it's important to be able to play in even positions well, trying to improve the positive aspects of your position and try to stifle your opponent's ability as well. And so that's something that come a little bit with experience. Still have a long way to go, but that's something you want to think about. Well, my opponent decided to defend the pawn. Well, what that does is it leaves c2 open and allows my rook to get in here. Rook to c2 check. Okay. He brings his king to the center, and now the key here, I can't, instead of attacking this pawn, which is one of the moves I considered, I saw that there was this potential fork here. And so I played here knight to g6. So I'm threatening this pawn as well as bishop to f4 check here. Now opponent, again, he played a very strong move, bishop to d3. My rook is threatened, my knight is threatened, and I took a little while on how to respond. Retreating my rook, I felt was not the right move, and I calculated the ramifications of bishop to f4 check, and then I realized that it was very good. Bishop to f4 check, king to e4, and instead of playing bishop takes, for example, bishop takes g5, bishop takes c2, f5 check, for example. This is some analysis I did. King to d3, and then knight to h4. This leads to about an even position. He has the two bishops, but my knight is well placed, and these pawns a little bit weaker than my pawns because they're together. So I would consider this pretty even. However, here I gave him some more opportunities to make mistakes. I could go back to the position, and I played f5 check. You can see he doesn't have any safe place to go with his king, so he has to sacrifice his rook here. Rook takes f5, and then e takes f5 check. Now, just on a practical level, this is actually where I stopped calculating because I figured after king takes f5, I saw that I had several good moves, which I'll go over in a second. Um, but I stopped calculating much further, other than to see that I can get my rook out to safety. Okay, king takes f5. Now here there were three main moves that I considered. One was well, the first one that came to me was rook to d2 with uh, skewering these two bishops. However, during the game, I saw that he had bishop to c5 check. Now, further analysis shows that it's actually good for me here because I'm going to win if it does that. But the other check that I saw that made me shy away from this, bishop to f6 check. And after, say, king to f8 to avoid this check here, gets his bishop to safety. I can bring my king up to protect this knight. And then with h5, knight to f8, and then something like bishop to c3. Pretty even, because these pawns are a little dangerous. My rook still needs to get to safety. It's a pretty even game here. So, but I was worried about uh, this check here and then trying to calculate all those ramifications. So I looked elsewhere. I saw rook to g2, protecting this knight, which is the main, it's kind of holding up this bishop here. But again, after bishop to f6 check, it gets a little messy. Okay, f7, for example, and if he attacks this knight, I do have something like this. Knight takes e5. Now, if he takes my bishop, I take his bishop. So again, a little bit messy, and I didn't really, um, although it looked okay for me, I felt that the clearest, I didn't want to miss anything in the analysis. So I actually played the third move, which was rook to c. So the main reason behind these candidates, just to clarify, is I need to protect this knight, and I also, of course, need to get my rook to safety. So I need to move the rook most likely, and those were the three ways. So one to counterattack, one to protect the rook this way, and the move that I chose, which I'm sorry, to protect the knight. The move that I chose to protect the knight this way. Okay, so the next few moves here I actually saw in my analysis during the game, and I actually saw it here, unfortunately, and I don't. My opponent didn't see this. Uh, he attacks my rook here, and here I saw that it was he could have forced a draw. Okay, I have to stay on this rank in order to protect this knight. So of course these two squares are covered. This square is covered, and if I go to this square, then he has this pin. Show that to you. Then he has this. Okay, so I went to e6, the only safe square. Now, here, if my opponent had played bishop to c4, well, then again, I really wouldn't have anything um, better to do than to just repeat the position here with rook to c6. Then he could attack my rook again, and so on. Okay, so he could have forced a draw that way. However, did not do that. He played h5, attacking my knight. Seems like a natural move, but I actually saw the continuation here when I played rook to c6. Was very happy about this. Bishop to e5. Okay, of course, if he takes my bishop, then I can, well, I can do a couple things. I can take with the rook and then win this bishop, or I can keep the knight on here. And so I'm in pretty good shape with a rook for the 3 pawns. Okay. Instead, he plays bishop to c5 check. And I also saw this bishop to d6. So now my knight, I'm going to get an even trade here and then have material advantage. Okay. At this point in the game, okay, so the move before, let's just go back here. At this point, if he had played bishop to c4, it would have been could have forced a draw. But as soon as he played h5, I gained an. Okay, bishop to e5, bishop to c5 check, bishop to d6, and he decided to take here. Would have been a little more complicated if he had played his bishop back, because these two bishops are very powerful together. But I still think I would have an advantage after a move like knight to f4, attacking these. Okay, after bishop takes d6 check, rook takes d6, and h takes g6. And then, of course, I saw ahead of time rook to d5 check, king to g4, rook takes b5. So now we're in the final phase here. Definitely have an advantage, but I do need to be accurate. If these pawns were a little further advanced, might have been a little more dangerous. I should study that 2 pawns against a rook if there's no king support. However, with my king nearby, I was able to defend. So he plays h4, and then I bring my king in, attacking this pawn, and he plays h5. Now, at this point, he offered me a draw, and I think he realized that he was not doing so well. But I saw the answer here. It's and if you want, you can pause the video and see what how you would continue at this point. There's several good moves, but I played rook to g5 check with the following in mind. After king to h4, rook to g1. So his king is totally cut off here. Any advance of these pawns, the pawns will get taken. And of course, this pawn is too far behind to help out. After f4, play king to f5. Of course, he cannot protect or he cannot advance either of these pawns, and his king cut off. King to h3, and this is actually a position where some knowledge of the endgame is important, because at this point, I want to take the pawn on f4, but if I didn't have the following threat, these 2 pawns could be very dangerous. Okay, and here's the threat. After king to f4, if he tries to, he can't bring his king back to support his pawns because of checkmate. So this mating threat forces him to to abandon these pawns, and they're not quite far enough. If this pawn was on h6, then it would be quite dangerous because he can advance his pawn and they affect each other. So he advances h6. The rest of the game is pretty straightforward. Rook takes g6, h7, and rook to h6 check, and my opponent resigned. It's always good to get a win. I was especially pleased during this game because it was against a higher rated opponent, and also this end game I thought was a nice fighting end game where I had to play good moves in an even position, and as I mentioned, that something that I've had to overcome moving up in the ratings. So, anyways, over there I'll be putting more videos from this tournament. I had a few instructive games, so I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. Leave a comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you over in the next video. Okay, check it out.